Every photograph unique, every teardrop unique. But from the story you saw there, she wanted me to tell her everything was going to be okay. That's a familiar question and a familiar moment that many people share with Lauren, where substance use disorder has taken lives and ravaged the lives of families and friends and loved ones. And they have all become more and more prevalent in our society today. And right now, we're in the middle of this pandemic caused by COVID-19, but the CDC tells us that the data suggests that more Americans have died in the last 12 months than any other point in history from a drug overdose. And together we have to sound the alarm to change that trend tonight. Good evening. I'm Jim Dunaway. We are live with you now. I want to bring back my friend Lauren Sisler, who I've known now for almost a decade, and I've heard her story many times, and every time it's equally as painful. The tears are just as fresh as they were the first time she shared with me the story. And also, please welcome in tonight a friend of ours. He's the general child and adolescent and addiction psychiatrist, Dr. Stephen Taylor. He serves as the medical director of the National Basketball Association and the NBPA's Player Assistance and Anti-Drug Program, as well as the chief medical officer for behavioral health and pathway healthcare. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for being with us tonight. And Lauren, thank you for sharing your story. We'll start with this. Another quote from the story. Nobody knew what to say. We know there's a stigma out there. So I'll start with you, Dr. Taylor. How do we break down these barriers? What are we doing to change the stigma of addiction? And Lauren, if you'll follow up Dr. Taylor's answer there, because I think that's a great place to start.
Well, Jim, thanks for asking. And first of all, I just want to say I've also heard Lauren's story several times. And Lauren, you absolutely rock. I mean, just being able to share that story with so many of us, it was extremely difficult to sit through yet again, and yet it was so helpful. And so thank you for sharing that with all of us. The answer is the question is, how do we break the stigma of addiction? The answer is we educate people. We make sure people understand what addiction is and what it is not. Addiction is an illness. In fact, it is a medical disease, a medical illness. The official sort of American Society of Addiction Medicine definition of addiction is that it is a treatable chronic medical disease. Okay, and it involves a complex interaction between your brain circuits, between your genetics, your environment, and your life circumstances. And it's a complex interaction between all of those things. So what does that mean? The first part of that definition, the first word of it, is that it's treatable. And that's one of the most important things for people to understand. Addiction is an illness that is treatable. The other thing that's obviously important to understand is that it is a chronic illness. It's a disease. Therefore, there is no reason to look down upon anybody who has the illness of addiction. It's not a spiritual weakness. It's not a sign that they've lost their way. It's not a sign that they're a bad person or an evil person. You saw that video. Lauren's parents were wonderful people, quite obviously, and look at the way that the tree bore fruit. Look at Lauren and her brother, terrific people in their own right. Obviously, addiction is an illness that affects good people, nice people, wonderful people. But the illness is an illness. And every person I've ever worked with and spoken to who is in recovery from addiction, and there are tremendous numbers of people in recovery from addiction, they've all said, I didn't raise my hand and say, hey, I want to have this illness called addiction. It happens to people. Nobody wants this. And so once we educate folks to understand that what addiction is an illness that is treatable and controllable, then we can realize that the thing to do when you run into someone with an addiction, or when you think about someone with an addiction, the thing to do is to reach out to help them, figure out how best to help them, not look down on them, not stigmatize them. If you happen to be a person who is struggling with an addiction, the thing to do is to get help, because it is a treatable illness. It's not something that means that you're doomed. It's not something that you need to be ashamed of and hide from. You need to reach out and get help, because help is available and this illness is treatable.
Yeah, Dr. Taylor, and going along with what you said there, talking about those barriers, those socioeconomic barriers that we have placed in our society. And it explains why I ran from addiction for so many years. Why did I run from reality? Why did I ignore what was in that autopsy report for so many years? For 10 years, it took me to read those autopsy reports because I wanted to hide from the reality of what had happened. Because throughout my childhood and growing up, I had been taught what addiction is and what it looked like and what it was supposed to be and who it was supposed to impact. And it wasn't supposed to impact my parents. It wasn't supposed to impact the people that I love the most. And so, in trying to break down this stigma, trying to better understand what addiction and substance use disorder is, I have now been able to pull back the curtain, change my lens, and to realize that my parents are no different than me or you or anyone out there that is watching right now. My parents fell into the same addictive trap after spending years going to a pain management doctor and trying to cope with their chronic pain and obviously their depression and addiction. But with all that being said, we fall into this this trap of thinking it's got to be someone from this location and it's got to be someone that comes from this neighborhood and has this job. But that's the farthest thing from the truth. We are all impacted by addiction. And I think the biggest key and how do we shatter that stigma is to become educated. And that's not just the people that are impacted by addiction, but we all have to be educated on this. We all have to be empowered. We have to fill our toolbox with everything that we can so that we can prevent this from happening in the first place. And if we go down that pathway, as Dr. Taylor said, we have to find the resources, and there are resources out there, and there is hope for recovery.
And this is a problem from New York to LA to the foothills of Virginia, as we've learned here tonight. So, Dr. Taylor, I'll ask you, we're in day 324 of this isolation, this social distancing in America, and the facts are drug use are up, mental health disorder is up in our country. So what are some of the trends you're seeing and what's being done to eradicate and slow down these trends to sort of, stop the curve and sort of flatten the curve of addiction in our country?
Once again, we're reaching out with education. The fact of the matter is, you're absolutely right, Jim. The CDC has done a study and they actually conducted this study last year in 2020, and they found that 13%, more than 13% of U.S. adults reported that they either started substance use or increased substance use that they were already doing as a way of coping with the pandemic. So one of the things we have to do is make sure that people understand, look, the pandemic is stressful. It is difficult to go through it. It's the anxiety of whether or not you're going to catch this virus is real. The isolation that we all have to go through in order to try to protect ourselves, that isolation can be difficult. But the fact of the matter is, it's important for us to still reach out for help if we find that the only way we know how to cope, or the way that we find to be most effective in coping, is to turn to some kind of a substance, because that obviously can lead to significant problems. We also know that for those folks who already have an addiction problem, the pandemic has spelled a big problem for them, because it's made their access to treatment services harder to get. It's made it so that the illness itself is worsened, because when we tell people about how to recover from addiction, we tell them, don't isolate yourself, be around other people, be around healthy people, go to mutual help meetings so that you can be around other people who are also working on recovery. Go seek treatment from professionals who can help you. In many cases, it means taking a medication that can help you with that illness, particularly if it's an opioid addiction. Well, all of that is so much more difficult if we're in this pandemic and we're supposed to socially isolate. And a lot of treatment facilities have closed down or have gone to virtual only kinds of treatment services. And so it becomes much more disorienting and much more difficult. But the message that we've got to get to people, and there are many of us who are getting that message out through forums like this one, is that don't give up. Go ahead, reach out, and call your doctor, make phone calls to public health facilities, to medical associations in your state. Reach out and ask for help, because help is available. It may be a little bit more difficult. You may need to do some things online if possible. But bottom line is, don't just isolate with reaching out and getting some kind of help, because again, it's a treatable illness and it must be treated, or else, as we already can have tragic consequences in terms of ruining a life and then prematurely ending a life.
We have all that information at laurensisler.com/sidelines for you in one place, and we'll give you that website again a little bit later. Lauren, whether you're a coach preparing for a game, an athlete preparing for an event, a sportscaster on a deadline, we all just move so fast. For you, I know in the story you said there were no signs. Looking back now, do you remember any signs that were indications that your parents were going through this?
Yeah, Jim, you make a good point there, because we do live our lives and we try to find that normal. And growing up, hindsight's always 20/20. And I've learned that, time and time again, and more specifically in this situation. But looking back, I had that tunnel vision. I was so focused on my schoolwork and my gymnastics and really just kind of going day to day. And everything that I was seeing happening around me seemed normal. And I think that my parents normalized their pain. So when they would wake up in the morning, I knew that they were taking prescription medication to get out of bed in the morning, to try to function, to try to find that normalcy. I knew that they were going to a pain management doctor. But to me, that was normal for them. And sure, it's a doctor. He's prescribing it. It has to be okay, right? Well, looking back, some of the red flags that I did see were, for instance, you talk about sports. I grew up in a sports family. We love sports. And it was always college football on Saturdays, NFL. We'd be watching NASCAR, whatever it may be. And, I enjoyed the time with my parents to sit around, watch a good movie, watch sports on TV. And I noticed that my dad would just fall asleep at the drop of a hat. 10 minutes into a movie and he's already asleep. And in my mind, I just thought, he's tired. He's had a long week at work. That's normal. No big deal. Other instances I saw where, my mom, a very happy person, would get angry, and I would hear behind closed doors her accusing my dad of taking her medication. You took the last of my medication. And she would be so upset, and it would create this, this big fight between the two of them. And in my mind, I was just like, well, that's normal. She's just, she's got tension because of that. She called me up at Rutgers one day and she was furious. And she just said, Lauren, you're not going to be able to go back to school. Financially, we cannot afford this. And so I started seeing trends with the finances being in turmoil. And I think that's where my aunt had pointed out in the documentary that my grandfather was loaning them money during that time frame. And this was all stuff that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know that we were in a financial crisis. I didn't know that my parents had to go to my aunt and borrow money to buy my prom dress, to pay for my computer to go to college. I didn't know any of these things because, they kept it a secret. And lastly, one incident that happened that really, shook me at the time. And now looking back, I think, wow, how did I not know? Thanksgiving, I was home on break when I was at Rutgers. It was between my first and second semester. And I wake up to my mom screaming and run downstairs, and my dad is not breathing. And we call 911. We get him the help he needs. We get him to the hospital. And, what happened, Mom? Tell me, why is Dad not breathing? And we were told that he had a bad reaction to medication. That was what I believed. A bad reaction to medication. It's probably blood pressure medication, something else that mixed together and, caused this issue. What I didn't know is that he had actually read somewhere online that he could take the fentanyl medication that was prescribed to my mom, the prescription paid patch, which ultimately took his life and my mom's as well, that he could actually take that orally to get the immediate high and get the, the relief that he needed from the pain that he was feeling. And not only from obviously the chronic pain, but the addiction pain as well.
Don't forget, you can ask questions live tonight, and we have one from the audience now from Anonymous. And Dr. Taylor, I'll let you answer this. This person would like to know what they can do if their sibling is currently in an active addiction situation, how can they help her out? What would you advise there? What would be the first steps? How do you start the conversation?
Oh, that's such an important question. Thanks for that question. Look, when you have a loved one who is actively in the throes of addiction, it's extremely difficult. One of the things that you can try to do when that person is sort of in between times when they're using and intoxicated, during a time when they're maybe sober, try to talk with them then. Because if there's one thing people need to understand, a person who has an addiction is sick. They don't enjoy being of that illness, and so deep down they really want to get help, even though you can't necessarily tell using. So you got to try to find a time when your sibling is not intoxicated, and then try to convince them to get some help and let them know that you don't look down upon them, you don't resent them, you love them, and you love them unconditionally, and that you will be there to get them help as soon as they are will let you help them. What you don't do is enable. And we saw in the video about enabling someone, giving them money um, just when you don't necessarily know for sure where money is going to go. You don't want to enable the person. So if you're going to give that your sibling help, you want to give them help only for the purpose of seeking treatment and getting help from this disease. Until that disease is properly diagnosed and treated in an effective way, nothing good's going to happen from your efforts to try to help your sibling or give them money or put them up or what have you. So the issue is tough love, but understanding what tough love really means. It means staying in there and loving that person unconditionally, but at the same time not enabling them, providing them help that means that you're only going to help them to get treatment, to get that disease, that devastating disease under control. You're not going to give them monies that they can then use and go and spend and get high. You're not going to let them sleep on your couch if they're not agreeing to then go and get some treatment. And all they're going to do the next day after they wake up is go back out and use again. You don't do that because that's enabling. And so it's really important to learn that difference. But when you can talk to them and get them help, then you stop at nothing to get them help. And you support them 100% when they're trying to get some help for that illness. And you let them know you're with them every step of the way. Recovery from addiction is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So you're going to help them and you're going to stay with them. And you make sure they understand that. And make sure that they understand that you recognize they have an illness. So all those terrible things they've done to you, the lying, the stealing, whatever else, you understand it's not them. It's the disease that has controlled their brain that has them doing that. But at the same time, you're not going to let them mistreat you or abuse you or abuse your family or abuse your property. That's how you help a person with an addiction. And it is not easy. That's why it's tough love.
LaurenSisler.com/sidelines for the information to get your sibling help. And we'll give you that website right there on the screen. You can write it down, LaurenSisler.com/sidelines. Lauren, before I come back to you, I want to ask the doc, and you can weigh in here too, because I know you know this very well. And this is just a question off the top of my head, because, I've got 2 kids, I've got a wife, I've got friends, and you're talking about enabling, but still loving that person. That really seems like the line is very fine there. I want to love, I want to help them, I want to do whatever I can for them, but you're telling me not to enable them. Where is that line drawn? Where that seems to be a very thin line. It seems like the difference between enabling and loving somebody is a very gray area.
It is. The distinction is the help that you're giving them specifically for the purpose of them getting treatment and getting help for this disease. If it's not specifically for that purpose, if they have not agreed with you that they are going to commit themselves to getting help for that illness, then the help you're giving more likely than not is just enabling them, because you're just enabling them to maybe have a place to sleep or have a little money in their pocket or have a meal until they feel a little bit better, and then they're going to go back out and use again. That's enabling. Loving them in a way that helps them with recovery means that you're helping them, but you're helping them specifically for the purpose of them getting treatment for that disease. Because you know that given the way addiction is, if they're not getting treatment for this disease, all bets is off. All bets are off. This disease is going to cause them to struggle and suffer and do all kinds of dangerous things to themselves and others, and nothing good will come from that. So that's the defining line. Is the help I'm giving specifically for the purpose of getting them help and treatment, and have they agreed and committed that they're going to do that? If not, then you really can't help them, and your efforts to help them will eventually only hurt them.
Yeah,
Lauren,
and I
talk to
think
me about
adding to that, Dr. Taylor,
Yeah, go
Dr.
ahead,
Taylor, I
Lauren.
would say, setting those boundaries is so important. So even writing those boundaries down, saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to help, the do's and the don'ts, and sticking to that, because it's so easy to have that sliding scale of, oh, well, this time, okay, it won't happen again. It won't happen again. And next thing you know, you're 2, 3, 4 years down the road dealing with the same situation. And one thing I want to point out, and this statistic coming from the executive director, Carrie Wimberly, shout out to her, at the Addiction Prevention Coalition. She said only 10% of people who have substance use disorder actually get the help they need before they crash. And what that means is they only get the help they need before they crash, before they lose a job, before they lose all their money, their finances, lose a roof over their head, maybe experience a divorce, losing their family. So only 10% of the people in this population who are experiencing substance use disorder actually wait until they've hit an absolute rock bottom to get the help that they need. And so we really want to try to change that trend. How do we increase that? How do we get to 20% or 30% of that where people are saying, I need help right now? And the hope is this conversation tonight will be a catalyst for that.
Yeah, it's part of the education process. And guys, education seems to be so important. So I'll ask you this question. What are important questions that we should be asking ourselves and asking our healthcare providers to ensure that we are making the right choices for our own health? And Dr. Taylor, I'll start with you.
Well, the most important thing is to understand if you have a relationship to a substance or even a food or cigarette smoking or anything of that sort that is beginning to be an unhealthy relationship where you're depending on it, even after it's beginning to cause you harm, then that's the time to start letting your healthcare provider know, if you have one, that, hey, you know what? Can you help me figure out if this is a problem for me and if this is something that maybe I need to pay some attention to and maybe do something about? The other part of the definition of addiction is that the person continues to engage in that behavior or use that substance even after it causes them adverse consequences, even after it does harm to them. And they do it in a way that is compulsive. In other words, they lose control. So once you know that that you're developing a pattern of using a substance or engaging in a behavior, and you're not controlling it anymore, it's controlling you, that's your red flag. That's your sign. And to be honest, more often than not, it's someone in your life, someone else around you who sees that before you do. But certainly if you're able to see it, or if you're having people starting to question that in you, that's the time to go ahead and put your hand up and ask for some help, because nothing good's going to happen from ignoring it or trying people to just leave you alone. You got to get some help, and your healthcare provider is the best place really to start.
Lauren, do you have anything you want to add to that? Is there anything that you've seen in your life talking to other people since what happened to your family?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that, the misperception that we have is that if we go to a doctor, if they have doctor in front of their name or they are an MD, and you can vouch for
Right.
this, Dr. Taylor, that it's okay, right? And we work in the world of sports, Jim. We see this time and time again, and you as well, Dr. Taylor. An injury happens. You want to get back out on the field. You want to get it back out there and play. What do I got to do to make it to the next level? And so it's easy to go to the doctor, get that prescription, say, okay, man, the pain's gone. I'm good to go. But then next thing you know, you've actually just put a Band-Aid on the injury, and your pill bottle has run out, your prescription has run out, and I got to get this refilled. And then the pain is still there and the injury is even worse than it was to begin with. And then you start seeking out that medication from somewhere else, from some other resource that is not a doctor. And so you can get caught into that vicious cycle. And so I think that's really the biggest area that we have to focus on, is knowing that, you have to know yourself, know your body. You can be your own biggest advocate in all this. You're going to be your best advocate. So you've got to educate yourself, empower yourself, and know what to look for and say, you know what? This just doesn't feel right. This just doesn't feel right at all. And it's not worth the risk of going down that pathway to addiction, a disease and an illness that can be with you the rest of your life. And so it's so important to ask yourself important questions. And I'll tell you, it really triggered me. I was asked not too long ago, do you feel like your parents were failed by the healthcare system with the lack of education? And it had me thinking. The answer to that, yes, because there were times, in my parents, addiction, and obviously the journey that they took to get to where they were, where, I look back at some journaling that my mom did about her pain and the medication she was taking, and she was so naive to what was to come. The prescription drugs were prescribed by a doctor. I'm doing what I'm told. I wake up this morning, I take this Oxycontin. I wake up, I eat my breakfast. I do this. Middle of the day, I'm in pain. I take another prescription drug, a prescription pill that's prescribed to me. But she was just going by her regimen. And I really, truly don't think that she had a comprehension that this was getting out of control and that she was abusing this medication. And so I think it's so important that when you do go into your doctor, you ask them these important questions. Why am I taking this medication? Are there other alternatives to taking this medication? How long should I be on this medication before I should wean off of it? And then, of course, letting them know about your history. I know they give you those pieces of paper where you have to fill out your family history and go through all these things. And I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes I just check the boxes, run through it. But it is so important to, be transparent. I've got a family history of this. I've got a history of this. Be transparent with your doctor, because they are going to be able to help you to come up with a regimen, to figure out what's going to work for you. And it's not one size fits all, right, Dr. Taylor? It's not one size fits all. Everybody is different, but you've got to take inventory of yourself and be an advocate for yourself in all of this.
That is so true. The other thing to point out here is that, and I'll, as the representative of the medical profession here, we in the medical profession had a tremendous learning curve throughout this entire opioid and addiction epidemic. There are many, many doctors out there who really made some bad moves in terms of the way they prescribed medications to people, and with the best of intentions. Trying to relieve someone's pain is very often something that we doctors are trying to do out of the best of intentions, out of the goodness of our hearts. We don't want to see people suffer. We want our patients not to suffer. But we've had to learn that we have to be very careful and very judicious with the prescribing of prescription opioid medications, or frankly, any medication that can potentially cause side effects or potentially cause addiction. And there are a lot of doctors around who have made a lot of mistakes in terms of the way they prescribed. And quite frankly, one part of a person being their own best advocate and their own most effective advocate is to try to spend some time finding out, how much does your doctor know about addiction? Does your doctor prescribe a lot of prescription painkiller medications without necessarily checking to see, have they gotten drug screens to make sure that their patients are actually taking the medicines the way they're supposed to? Is this a doctor that's ever been in trouble with the state medical society or medical board because of prescribing habits? That's information that's public information, and that's knowable. So part of the advocacy that people need to do for themselves is checking out doctors. There is a range of knowledge among doctors about addiction and about how to help people, whether it's with pain syndromes or other illnesses, without having them develop addiction. And then to see if someone is developing a problem with addiction, to do about it. That is something that we've worked very hard to educate doctors in this country about. And there are doctors now who know about those kinds of things, but unfortunately there are some who do not, or who don't really care. And patients need to keep an eye out for trying to find those doctors who are knowledgeable.
We're running short on time, but I do have another audience question and then one more comment from you, Dr. Taylor. But Lauren, I'll ask you from the audience. Someone's wanting to know about just the shame, the stigma you were talking about in their neighborhood, in their church, in their work group. One of their it's their son is suffering, and they're trying to overcome that shame. What advice would you give them about putting the shame aside and trying to help out their child?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to the viewer who is asking this question, because it takes courage to get on this chat function, uh, this live audience, to ask that question. So you've taken the first step in that. And I'll tell you, that shame lived with me for so long. I had built up these walls brick by brick. I had to break them down. And thankfully, with the help of my auntie Linda, really helped me to do that. But I got to tell you, the truth will set you free. And I had no idea what that saying meant until I actually experienced it for myself, because I just ran from reality and I was shackled to this shame, because I was like, what are people going to think if they find out that my parents were drug addicts? What are they going to think of me? Maybe they're going to think that I could fall into those same addictive behaviors. Maybe they're going to think that my family, that my parents weren't equipped to raise my brother and I in the right manner. And maybe you experience some of those same things as a parent, that maybe it's a reflection on you as a parent of how you raised your child. But that is the furthest thing from the truth. And I am telling you, with transparency, you will be able to undo those shackles of shame. Because I'll tell you what, when I first spoke out and shared my parents' story, and it started in a very small group, one person, then two people, and then five people, I'll tell you, my best friend Ellie, growing up, did not even know that my parents died of prescription drug overdoses for 7 years. Can you believe that? 7 years. But I'm telling you, authenticity, transparency is key in this. And when you tell people your story and what you're going through, first of all, you're going to find that so many more people can relate to it than you even imagine. And second of all, you're going to find people that have never spoken up and will come to you and say, I've got this issue, I've got this thing going on. And that's why there's so many support groups out there. There's parents of addicted loved ones, PAL groups, PAL meetings that you can go to as parents to have these conversations, to help in your healing, help equip you, because this is not just about the addicted one, but also getting the healing that you need, and to better yourself through this process, because it is hard on everyone. But transparency is key. Undo those shackles of shame. I promise you, you will be set free and you will feel like you can breathe again.
And Dr. Taylor, I think that's a great place to ask you my final question for you tonight. I'm told only 10% of people who have substance use disorder actually get the help they need before they're crashed. 10% out of 100%. How do we get that number to, let's set a simple goal. How do we get that number to 20% first?
Well, we don't really start with a goal of just 20%. The bottom line is we put that message out there to anyone and everyone, every opportunity that we have, because you never know who's listening. You never know who might learn from it. We may, if we are aggressive and relentless in putting that message of educating people that this is an illness, that there's no reason for stigma or shame, that it's a treatable illness, so it makes no sense to not go and get help for the illness. If we continue to put that word out there, who knows that we won't go from 10% all the way up to 70%. We're not going to put a limit of 20%. The bottom line is we've got to relentlessly and persistently put the message out there. Let people know this is an illness. There is no intelligent reason whatsoever to be ashamed of having that illness. It has nothing to do with any kind of internal weakness or any kind of problem with your relationship with the creator or any nonsense like that. This is an illness. And I'll say one last thing. We doctors have a saying that in medical school: see one, do one, teach one. And so when you're learning something in medical school, you learn it, and you do it, and then the next thing you know, in order to reinforce your own learning and help someone else learn, you teach someone else. That is a good policy for people when it comes to addiction. As soon as you start educating yourself about the medical illness of addiction, that it's an illness, that there's no reason to be ashamed or to have a stigma attached to it, and there's every reason to get help for it because it's treatable and controllable, then it's time to teach someone else that. So when you're the person who asked the question and has a son that's got an addiction problem and they're concerned about people in the church or other folks that may have something to say about it, you become the teacher. You become the person to educate those folks. You assume that if they're saying anything about you or looking down on you in any way, it's because they don't know. It's out of ignorance. Time for you to become the teacher and you educate them, because probably in the process, you're going to help somebody. See one, do one, teach one. Time to start teaching folks, and then you will start spreading that word, and we'll get that number up from 10% to who knows, whatever it's going to be. We're not going to put a ceiling on it.
And everybody in the choir said amen. Dr. Taylor, thank you so much tonight
Woo!
for your knowledge, your expertise, and everything you provided tonight. For those that are watching live and for those that will see this on replay, thank you for your work in the world, and much success to you down the road. And Lauren, I know you'll have some final thoughts in a second, but we want to thank you again as well. And thank you so much to all of our sponsors tonight, the Addiction Prevention Coalition. You can visit their website at apcbham.org. That's apcbham.org for more information and resources. There you will also find a very helpful parent toolbox that provides some great educational materials and prevention packets there. And it's not just for parents. Also sponsoring this event, Impact Recovery, a drug and alcohol treatment center in Birmingham, Alabama. For information on their program, visit impactrecovery.net. We also encourage you to check out Lauren's website, laurensisler.com/sidelines, for additional resources for you and your loved ones who are seeking help. And Lauren, I'll give you the final word tonight. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Thank you, Lauren, for letting me be a part of this powerful hour of changing lives.
I got to tell you guys, my heart is absolutely on fire right now. A big mic drop there to Dr. Taylor. Be the teacher. Walk out of those shadows of shame. That's the whole mission here. We got to get off the sidelines and we got to get in the game and walk out of those shadows of shame. And, we're here tonight to have that conversation and can certainly do so. I just feel so empowered by this conversation, what we have learned tonight. I've learned so many things and taken a lot of notes along the way from Dr. Taylor. I feel like I always learn something new when I listen to him speak. And a couple final thoughts before I go. I just want to say, for those of you out there that are struggling right now, those of you who are just wondering, like, what next? How do I get through this? I go back to that incident I talked about with my father when he was in the hospital. And I didn't find this out till years later, but it absolutely broke my heart. And it gets me emotional thinking about it and talking about it. But I later found out that after my dad had overdosed and he was in the hospital, he said to my mom, maybe you would be better off without me. And for my father to live his life and to be in this world and to think that this world would be better off without him absolutely breaks my heart. Nobody out there right now should feel that type of shame. Nobody should feel that way, that they aren't worthy of being on this earth today, that they aren't worthy of a good quality of life, because you are. You are absolutely worth it. And I'm here to tell you that. There is hope. There are resources, and we hope that you will find the courage and the strength to go out there and seek those opportunities. Another message I want to share with you is, young students, young boys and girls, teenagers, adults, moving into adolescence, from adolescence to adulthood. I think a lot of times as we grow up, we feel we become a product of our circumstances. But I want to fix that image. I want to help people and encourage people and inspire people to know that you do not have to be a product of your circumstances. So if you have family members or loved ones, parents, whomever it may be, that might be struggling with addiction, that might be incarcerated because of addiction, because of drugs, that you do not have to follow down that same path, and that you are qualified for that roadmap to success. So, my hope and goal and vision for this project is to continue from here, to continue inspiring people, encouraging people, and letting people know that they are worth it. And so my hope is to build a scholarship fund that I can help to provide to students who want to further their education, to get a degree, to move on, to find their trade, to find their purpose in this life, because you deserve it, and you can work hard, and you can earn it, and you can find that pathway to success just like anybody else. And so with that, my closing remarks here, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Jim Dunaway for joining me on this mission. You've been with me all along the way since 2011, since I landed here in Birmingham, Alabama. I want to say thank you to Dr. Taylor joining me on the board at the Addiction Prevention Coalition. You are such a wealth of knowledge. You've always provided such great insight, and I'm always learning something new. I just want to thank both of you guys for your time tonight, for this very important conversation, and of course the premiere of my documentary, and all those that were a part of that. My brother Alan, my auntie Linda, my uncle Mike, my family, my friends, all being part of that documentary and making that possible. It's been a project that has been in the works for such a long time, and it's finally come to light, and I'm so thankful and so excited to share that with everyone. Also want to thank the team behind the scenes. Look, you guys make this thing go. Jim Dunaway, you guys know how that goes. You got to pull the curtain back. A big thank you to Jen Campbell, Todd Flournoy, of course, Brendan Kanaki that's on this as well. I knew I was going to mess up that name. Kaneka. I knew it was Kaneka sausage, but it's Kaneki. Kaneki. There we go. Brandon Kaneki. Carrie Wimberly at the Addiction Prevention Coalition. And then, of course, Lance Holloway and Danny Malloy, who made this documentary possible, who put in a lot of hours shooting it, filming it, producing it, putting it together. Their hard work means a lot. And, of course, Chris Davis. Shout out to him. He makes the website engine go. Love it. I appreciate you. And last but not least, I want to say a great big thank you. And I love you to my husband, John Willard, who has been here with me through thick and thin. And, you know, unfortunately, he never did have the opportunity to meet my parents. But I can assure you that my parents would very much approve of him. So thank you all for your love and support. We've got plenty more events coming your way. We hope to continue this conversation as we move down the line. And so for updates and to stay tuned for what we have coming your way, please visit my website, laurensisler.com/sidelines, which you can also find those resources there that we talked about. And also you can follow me on social media at Lauren Sisler for all those updates. Again, thank you so much for all your love and support. Much love to all of you guys, and good night.